Hello, friends, it's Kat from Meow Meow Kapow. A million zillion years ago, Hunter Marlette from Marlette Arts contacted me and was like, yo, I started making my own paints. You want to try some? And I was like, boy, howdy, do I ever! And then I got distracted and put them in a corner of my desk that is slowly becoming a mini palette graveyard and proceeded to forget I had them. Oops. But then recently, I was cruising Instagram and saw he'd put out a new Gemstones palette, and I was like, oh my god, those are so pretty! Oh dang, I need to review the paints you gave me. So sorry, oops. And he was like, no biggie. I changed my formula since back then anyway. Want to try these new ones? And yet another, boy howdy do I ever, resonated throughout the land. Of course, if you want to check out Marlette Art, I've put all the necessary info down in the doobly-doo, along with links to all the other supplies used in the video. In addition to the 4 colors in the Gemstone palette, which are Violet Rose, Sap Green, Quinacridone Turquoise, and Prussian Blue, Hunter also gave me a half pan of raw sienna. Possibly because we'd talked about how much he's changed the formula since the original batch I got, and possibly to make this particular color range more versatile. Purples and blues in this color chart are super pretty and saturated, but it's also absurdly easy to just off the cuff mix up a whole mess of neutralized colors. Really, really convenient. Personally, I love the way these colors all work together, and I'm super happy with them. As a sucker for gemstone shades, I'll be honest and say I'm absolutely the target market for this palette and am completely biased as far as the colors go. But how's the paint itself? As far as rewettability goes, all of the colors except for raw sienna gave up a huge pigment payload really easily. The raw sienna took a little more work to reach its potential, but it's not technically part of this set, and you're going to hear this a lot, but earth pigments are kind of their own deal. First of all, the layering test I've started doing for our watercolor reviews is one of the most tedious and time-consuming investigations, but gosh darn if it hasn't become one of the most informative. Shout out to whoever originally suggested it back when we did the Shinhan PWC tests, and feel free to give me a gold star for sticking with the practice. These paints layer fairly well, but I will say that the raw sienna and the sap green don't do it the best out of all the others. The sap green started to sort of break down the paper a bit, which is why it starts to look kind of mottled towards the heavier layers. Some of it is natural granulation in the paint, I suspect, but a lot of it seems to be an unevenness to how the pigment saturated the paper. The raw sienna is just too opaque naturally to be a great layering color. That's honestly not unexpected at all because a lot of earth tones are sort of known to be lifters and are also often known to skip leg day, if you can believe it. For shame. Speaking of lifting, the only paint that really truly lifted pretty much entirely was the raw sienna, which again is pretty typical of the pigment. The others I'd say lifted moderately, always at least halfway by my measure, but not fully. And I'd say that the raw sienna is really the only one that's got significant opacity to it. To test how drastically these paints bloom and flow across the page in wet-on-wet applications, I put a thin layer of water in this space and added small drops of each color. As you can see, most of them really like to spread out, but the Violet Rose and Quinacridone Turquoise held their shape pretty well. The Prussian Blue and Sap Green all but completely disintegrated during this test, which means they'd be great for soft blending areas. With all the technical know-how for what these paints can do, it's time to play around with them and decide on how they feel. Per usual, I made a doodle finder by scribbling all over the page and then using those shapes to find random images. Guess we've got a bird and a dog, maybe? One of the things about handmade paints that can either make you love them or hate them is that they all have their own unique character, and since each batch is, again, handmade, there's usually slight variations just from pan to pan, even of the same color. For instance, I've already mentioned that Hunter said he improved the formula of his paints between now and back when I got my original samples a few months ago. The thing is, small paint makers like Hunter often push their craft to make the best product, learning just a bit more with each batch. The people behind the paints are usually more accessible and you can often directly give them feedback, which usually leads to more testing of the product and sometimes even more reformulation. I don't know when the last time was that you tried to track someone down at Winsor & Newton to ask a question, but I have a feeling it's a bit faster and more personable to just chat with Hunter. He's been super kind and approachable every time I've asked him a question, and even when we're both being bad at returning messages, I was able to have a pretty steady stream of my queries handled. Using these paints to work with, I'd say they were really nice. I'll for sure use them again at some point because I love the colors, but I do find them a little denser and more dull than, say, Sennelier, who's also one of my go-to brands. Though the color is still way more pure and vibrant than quite a few of the other ones I've reviewed on this channel. I can't complain about them, and they were perfectly lovely. Will I be ranting and raving about them over the moon like crazy? Also, probably not. These have made a positive impression on me, but I don't know that they'll be my go-to palette. If you've tried Marlette Arts paints, I'd love to hear your impressions on them because I'm in like with them, but haven't found myself in love with them. There's one last experiment that hasn't needed to be relevant for a while. When I made the video testing a whole bunch of white pens to find my favorite, I mentioned that part of the reason I was looking into the results was because my then go-to was the Uniball Signo, which inexplicably would reactivate Sennelier's Opera Rose and turn the white ink pink. Now, don't ask me what the commonality is between Marlette Arts' Violet Rose and Sennelier's Opera Rose because Hunter said he can't confirm the actual pigment number of this Violet Rose, but I had an instinctual feeling that the paint would be another reactivator. Turns out, I was right. It really only takes a couple of seconds for the reaction to happen, so it can be easy to miss at first, but the Uniball Signo is not compatible with the Violet Rose unless you actually want this softer effect. I do like the way it looks in the stars, so I'm not really upset by it at all. If you know what your tools can do and how they react to each other, then you can make informed choices about how you use them. It's good to note as well that the other colors didn't have the same problem at all, and any highlights placed on the green bird, which didn't have any purple mixed into it, stayed vibrant. I swear, someday we're going to learn the mystery of why this happens with the specific pen against certain purpley pinky colors. If you're on the fence about trying out these paints, I'd say go ahead and do it. First of all, the prices are super reasonable, and you're supporting a small artisan who's making quality products with so much thought and care put into them. Just the little touches alone make these feel special, like how each pan was wrapped up like cute candy, and there's a sticker on the package that gives advice for what to do if they're gloopy when you go to unwrap them. I also adore the customized tin this palette came in, and love that Hunter even took the time to make a swatch card, as well as hand swatch the actual paint itself on the outside of each wrapped pan. You just won't get this kind of love and attention to detail from the big brands, and I do really enjoy feeling more connected to my materials. What do you think? Have you tried any handmade paints before? Let me know. In the meantime, please enjoy this footage of Bubba playing with his best friend, Ducky. Until I see you next time, I wish you peace, love, and paint tins. Bye!